I'd like to welcome you to a wonderful evening tonight, exploring the exceptional contributions of women to Jewish communal life. I'm Gail Jarneski. I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada. And the Jewish Heritage Centre is located on Treaty 1 territory, on the traditional lands and waters of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the original homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. These Indigenous peoples have cared for and occupied this land for millennia, stewarding its resources and deriving life and meaning from its abundance. We celebrate their place in our community, their contributions to our collective well-being, and their role in bringing about a hopeful future for us all. The Jewish Heritage Centre plays an integral role in the life of our community. In fact, we are the custodians of our collective memory, identity, and cultural heritage. Thanks to us, the stories of the people, the events, the news, all are preserved for today's and future generations. And in the last several months, our archivist, who you are about to meet, accessioned some 7,000 items. Of course, we also provide essential education and training on the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. And just last week, we welcomed 270 Manitoba teachers in Brandon and Winnipeg for training on the new curriculum. We depend on community support to help us continue with this essential work. And our annual Saul and Florence Caney fundraising lecture takes place on April 30th this year with guest speaker Dr. Rachel Fish. Her timely topic will be how the Academy has become a fertile ground for anti-Semitism. So please reach out to us for tickets and sponsorship opportunities. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Ava Garfinkel, our archivist. A lifelong member of the Winnipeg Jewish community and an enthusiastic historian, Ava studied art history at the University of Manitoba before achieving her Master's of Archaeology from Tel Aviv University. Ava was involved in several archaeological excavations in Israel, where she gained experience handling and preserving delicate artifacts. Her time as an archaeologist inspired her passion for Jewish history, and her personal connection to Winnipeg drew her back home. And so now, I'm happy to turn over the microphone to Ava.
Is this on?
Yeah?
Okay. Hi, I'm Ava. As you all know, I'm the archivist. I'm the archivist at the Jewish Heritage Centre, as Belle has let you all know. And tonight we have an awesome presentation in conjunction with our new exhibit, Let Her Works Praise Her, about the role of women in Winnipeg's Jewish communal life throughout history. I could talk more, but I think I'll just introduce everybody and let them talk because they have a lot of very interesting things to say. I'll start with the one closest to me is Leah Craven. Leah currently serves as the president of the National Council of Jewish Women Canada, Winnipeg section. She's a board member of the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba and also serves on their governance committee and grants committee. A dedicated community volunteer, she has previously been actively involved with Shalom Square, Grey Academy of Jewish Education, Congregation at Time, and Canadian Friends of Hebrew University. Leah is a lawyer. She's married to Stephen London and is the proud mother of 3 children, all of whom are active community members. Our second speaker is Marsha Cowan. Marsha is the retired CEO and president of the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba. She's the former vice president of the National Council of Jewish Women and was the honoree of the 1997 Negev Dinner. And she's held leadership positions in a number of essential community organizations, including Jewish Child and Family Services and the CJA. She's a proud alum of the University of Manitoba, where she studied teaching. And finally, we have Susan Turner, who's a visual artist working in digital printmaking using the computer, software, the camera, and large-scale archival pigment printers. She's exhibited widely in solo and group exhibitions and has received support for her work from the Arts Councils of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Canada. Two of her large-scale prints in the collection of the Winnipeg Art Gallery are currently on exhibit in its group show Staycation. She has curated and co-curated and designed several major exhibitions at the Jewish Heritage Center. She has sung in synagogue choirs and has worked at the Sharon Home. She's volunteered with artist-run centers and for Yazidi refugees via Operation Ezra. Now I'm going to let all of our presenters tell you a little bit more about themselves and about their experiences in the community. And I believe we're going to start with Leah, and then we will get to some questions.
Does this work?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Ava, for that very kind introduction. And good evening. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm grateful to be part of this panel, and I'm grateful to be part of this conversation. So when I think about how I became involved in community, I can't recall a pivotal moment or a defining moment. Community has always been part of my life. I've always felt connected to community. And largely that's because of how I was raised. I was raised in Winnipeg in a very traditional Jewish household. Volunteering was simply part of our lives. My parents led by example. My father, Mel Craven, of blessed memory, was a very active community volunteer and leader. My mom, who's here tonight, continues to be very engaged and very involved in community. And really in our home growing up, volunteering in community wasn't portrayed as an extra or something you did when you had free time. It was incorporated into our daily lives. It was part of who we were. It was part of being Jewish. It was part of Tikkun Olam. And we felt that very deeply growing up. And for me, that sense of responsibility really stems from my family history. I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and even from a young age, I appreciated, I had an understanding that there were people in our community who struggled, who continued to struggle, and who relied on communal care. And I saw that firsthand through my grandparents' experience. And I understood, even as a young age, that I was fortunate, privileged really, to be in a position to contribute and to give back. And it was something that I felt very strongly about from a young age. I was thinking about this, and my first independent memory of volunteering goes back to when I was in elementary school. I was a student at Ramah Hebrew School, and my father had a colleague who was very active in his church's Sunday youth group. They were learning about the Old Testament and about Hebrew language. My father was the only Jewish person this man knew, and so he asked my father if he would attend on a Sunday morning and talk about Hebrew language by way of introduction. My dad asked if I was interested in doing that, and I said yes. So I remember working very diligently on a chart of the Hebrew alphabet and their transliterated sounds. And Sunday morning I went to the church and I talked about the letters and their sounds, and I gave every student a card with their names written out in Hebrew letters. It was my first time in a church. I met some nice people, but it was just fun. I enjoyed it. I thought I was going to become a teacher after that, but I did not. But it really, it was an early lesson for me. When I look back to that experience, it was an early lesson in that I stepped forward because someone asked me to. Someone opened a door for me, and someone invited me in. someone trusted me. And that pattern of being invited in, being encouraged, being asked, really has repeated itself throughout my life, and I'm grateful for that. And that idea came to me even more meaningfully after my father passed away. After he passed, someone told me a story that I did not know before, that this individual had been new to the city. They were a single mother. They were struggling. They were feeling alone. They were feeling isolated. My father didn't know that. My father couldn't have known that. My father was introduced to this individual. So my father asked if she was interested in joining a committee on a board where he served. And this person shared with me how that invitation made such a difference to her life. It gave her a sense of belonging when she was feeling isolated, and it made her feel seen. And that really inspired me, and that has stayed with me to this day. The idea that small gestures can open up big doors for people. And in my experience, community building isn't always about structure or strategy. In my experience, it can be as simple as noticing someone and inviting them in. And so when I think about that understanding that I have of community, again, it goes back to my earliest days. Volunteering was a family affair. Really, I think it's in my DNA. My parents, my sisters, and I spent countless hours volunteering at Folklorama, Shalom Square, at synagogue. We set up, we made food, we cleaned up, we schlepped. Wasn't glamorous, but it taught me that community is sustained by those everyday acts of showing up. And then in university, I'd say that sense of responsibility really expanded. I became active with Jewish Students Associations. I remember organizing and attending rallies in support of Soviet Jewry on campus, in front of the legislature. I remember writing letters of complaint against anti-Semitic articles that appeared in the Manitoban, calling out anti-Semitism in class on campus. And sadly, all those activities continue and are needed. But at the time, I saw that community life isn't always about programming and events, and that it can be about being visible and about showing up and about standing up for what matters. And that theme continued for me as I entered professional stage of my life. As a young professional, I became very involved with Canadian Friends of Hebrew University. And looking back to that experience, again, it showed me how powerful and important those early invitations can be. So I was thinking about this for today, and given that today is about Jewish women's contributions to communal life, I want to reflect on something, and I think it's fair to say that formal barriers for women to enter community leadership professions don't exist to the extent that they did generations before us. Many of us are invited to leadership tables. We're invited to chair, to lead, to speak, to make decisions, and that progress is real and that progress matters. But I think at the same time, women can still navigate a quieter reality. In my experience, even when professional community leaderships are open to women, the day-to-day responsibility of home and of family often still falls to women. It may not be explicit, but in my experience, it's real, and if I'm being honest, I've certainly felt it at times. in chatting with Ava before today and with Stan, just about challenges that I've faced with community involvement. For me, the biggest challenge has never been willingness to get involved, it's always been capacity to get involved. And as a student, it was about balancing volunteering with academics. As a young professional, I had to find a way to balance volunteering with early career development and professional demands. But for me, for sure, the biggest challenge to volunteering happened when I started a family and my capacity really changed. And so during those early years, I looked for involvement that would fit into family life, and that looked like involvement with youth programming at synagogues, volunteering at school, and it was around that time that I discovered National Council of Jewish Women. I was drawn to its mission, service, education, and social action. As soon as I heard that and learned of its history, it resonated with me. I was hooked. And I was really attracted to the idea of a Jewish women's organization. And I actually have to say, I look around this room and next to me, and there are so many amazing women who are past presidents of National Council of Jewish Women, Winnipeg section, members of our current board. And from the time I became involved with National Council of Jewish Women, it was a community unto itself. And I'm actually thrilled to just be surrounded by so many incredible women who have been mentors to me, who I've learned from and who I continue to learn from. And that has been such a powerful influence in my life. When my children were babies, I was able to bring them to National Council meetings. They came with me on deliveries of food hampers. They helped me gather mishloach manot. They helped me stuff envelopes. They did all sorts of little tasks. And they mattered. These little tasks allowed me to stay engaged. And most importantly, they showed my children what community involvement means, and that it's not separate from our daily lives. It's part of who we live, how we live, it's part of who we are, and it's part of being Jewish. And so as my capacity grew, as my children got older, I deepened my relationship with National Council of Jewish Women. My family moved away from Winnipeg for a number of years, and when we returned about 8 years ago, I became really involved with National Council. Someone asked me if I would consider serving as the secretary, and someone asked me if I would serve as vice president, and now I have the honor of serving as president. And I've had a lot of support along the way. And I really see it as a great privilege to be able to learn from incredible women at different stages of life, from different backgrounds and from different professions. And being in those spaces has shaped how I think and how I work. And so when I think about balancing work, family, and community, I don't think of it as something that's ever truly resolved. For me, it shifts. Sometimes community takes more, sometimes work takes more, and sometimes family takes everything I have. And I have found that sometimes involvement can mean leading. Other times it's just showing up, making the phone calls, bringing the meals, or inviting someone to sit with you and say, there's a place here for you. We have a job for you. And so I come back to that idea. In my experience, that's often how it starts. Someone asks, someone invites, and someone makes room. So I'll end with this. I'm grateful to the women who paved the way before us. I'm grateful to be part of a community that values women's leadership, both the visible leadership and the behind-the-scenes work that truly makes organizations run. And thank you for inviting me to be here today.
Thanks, Leah. I'm just gonna get Marsha's PowerPoint up.
Do I have to do anything
It's
to
on.
this?
No, it's on.
That's fine?
Yeah.
You can hear me? Good.
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. Like Leah, I've been asked many times what inspired me to get into the fundraising and volunteer world. And I have to say that I really don't know. But I can think back also to childhood. And when I was 7 years old actually, 1952, was the polio epidemic. And we were at Winnipeg Beach for the whole summer. And my parents told me we could not go into the city because the government wouldn't let us. You weren't supposed to go into crowds, you weren't supposed to go to movie theaters. And this really resonated with me. And so I asked my mother if she would buy a box of chocolates. And I was going to get a bunch of little pieces of paper and cut them up and put numbers on them and go up and down our street, on Oak Street, and raffle the box of chocolates, which I did. And I remember the day that we pulled out the number of that lucky lady who won the box of chocolates. And then we sent my $2.35 to the Tribune for the cause. So that was the beginning somehow or other. I had a very typical Jewish upbringing, Winnipeg's North End, Parrott School, BBYO, USY, the YMHA, University of Manitoba. As was indicated, I taught school, I got married, and then I joined National Council of Jewish Women. And that was where I learned about service to the community. So National Council of Jewish Women had a seniors drop-in center on Pritchard Avenue. They were definitely before their time. That drop-in center, nobody had done one in Canada. And it was there for about 40 years, and I remember volunteering there. And then they decided that they needed to move to West Kildonan. And so they bought a building that needed to be gutted, and my phone rang. Would I be interested in raising the money to renovate this building? I said, well, how much? Well, $100,000. And I thought, okay, that would be 100 people at $1,000 each. That's doable, right? So I accepted. And off I went, started on my little task, and about halfway through, my phone rang again. And this time, it was Mr. Joe Sector, who was a senior member, and everybody knew him in the community. And he said, Marsha, we're ready to sell rooms. He said, the building is going to be named after my late wife, Gwen, therefore, Gwen Sector Creative Living Center, which we all know about. And he said, so Marjorie Blankstein's going to take the first room. It'll be $25,000, and then the little rooms will be 15, and then the foyer and the garden will be 10. I had never heard of selling rooms. I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought I was in for $1,000. And then he said, and tonight when Eddie gets home, suggest to him that the two of you do the garden. That was my entree to the fundraising world. Oh my goodness, right? I went from, so I brought some pictures, and this is the entrance, and that was our team, myself and Carla Goldstein, Sharon Walchuk, and Diane Glass. And next picture, this was in the Jewish paper. You can see Morley Blankstein, he's in the middle. He had volunteered, because he's an architect, to design the wall, and I remember how many months it took him, because every name had to be spelled exactly right and periods and commas, and I thought, oh my God, how does this man have the patience? But that was, again, our team, and I believe the wall is still there. Thank you. I went on to Jewish Child and Family, and this was another team. This is myself and Sybil Shack and Somer James. I'm 35 here, Sybil is 71, and Somer was in his late 50s. And it just goes to show the interesting people that you can come across in your volunteer world. This was CJA, a convention in Vancouver, has lots of familiar names and faces. As I spent a time doing campaign work there, heading up the major campaign and so on. Thank you. So pretty soon I got a call to come to the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba board. Would I be interested? And Stan asked me to comment, if I could, on what it was like to be involved in organizations at that level when related to the men who were involved and ran the show. And I have to say, I don't remember having any particularly difficult experiences except for a couple of little quirky things. So my first board meeting that I went to, I walked into a room, one woman, Myrna Levin, who was my mother's age, and me. We were the only two women, 18 men. So this really was an old boys club. And this was the beginning of a new time for me. But I moved my way up the board, eventually became president, and on my very first board meeting day that I was chairing, I walked in and one of those old boys said, we've got our own Kim Campbell. I could have snapped back, but I didn't. But I have to tell you, my secret was that I had met Kim Campbell because she was married to my cousin. So there you have it, mister. Anyway, while I was on the board, I heard Susan Liebman Schneider, and there she is up in that picture there, speaking about women's philanthropy. Susan talked about all the women on their display downstairs, sorry, and what life was like for them, volunteering, running a household, but at the end of the day, they never had anything to do with where the money went. And Susan's topic was women raising money and giving out money and making decisions about philanthropy because women think differently and perhaps the result would be quite a bit different. Well, a few of my friends and I who were sitting listening to her were so taken with this that we started to talk about starting a women's endowment fund. And we met for months on end, we did research. I have to tell you, there were none in Canada, 2 that we could find in the US, and we decided to see if the Jewish Foundation would be willing to host us. We would put our endowment fund there, and we would become a committee of the board. In order for this to happen, we had to go to the board, and I was on the board, get it passed. I made my little blurb, and here comes the old boys club again. The comment, they'll never raise any money with $100 bills. I said, just you wait and see. So, if you can spare, this is the opening of the Women's Endowment Fund. We expected 50 people, there were 200 women. It's at the concert hall on the main floor, and we started the fund with $20,000, and we were beside ourselves. Women were so excited that this was really a special opportunity for them. Oh, thank you. We got a lot of press, not just in the Jewish paper. I happen to have this clipping. The Free Press was writing about us all the time and the work that we were doing. So here's our result. The Women's Endowment Fund, as of December, stands at $2.4 million. The Women's Endowment Fund gives out $100,000 a year, and since inception has distributed $1 million into Manitoba for women's issues. So to our old boys club, we toast you, but this just goes to show what some creativity can do. And we, like the Golden Age Club, the Women's Endowment Fund was just ahead of its time. And I'm proud to be one of those Winnipeg women who was around for all of this. I just have to stop for a second. So I think Ava said I was CEO of the Jewish Foundation, and we still have a saying at the foundation that we match donors with projects and projects with donors. And I think that is the thrill of it all, because when you see a project coming to fruition and a big smile on that donor's face because they helped to make it happen, it is the absolute best thing of the world. So where did this come from? I don't know if it was the box of chocolates. And I have to step aside from what I was going to say. Leah's husband, Stephen London, came up to me when we got here, and he's chairing BB Camp Board, and he asked me if I had any pictures or information from the camp in its inception when it was in Winnipeg Beach and Husavik, and I do. Not only do I, but I have stories. And I said to him, you call me, I'll tell you these stories. But the one that I want you to know is my dad was a swimming instructor there in 1929. And he used to tell me how anybody could come to camp. You didn't have to be able to afford to pay. They looked after everybody. And I'm a little kid and I go, how? And he said, well, when people came to register, we had a table right at the outset of the yard. And if somebody drove up in a car, that meant they had money. And then they would say, Mr. Cowan or Mr. Schwartz, thank you so much for bringing your daughter to camp. We have so many children who can't afford it. Would you pay for two? I say, oh, and what did they say? He said they never said no. Thank you.
Thanks, Marsha. I'm just going to pull up our next PowerPoint quickly.
Ava, you can leave it off for now.
Oh, okay.
Start by talking about it. Just put the first slide.
Okay, I got it.
Well, I have to say these are two very hard acts to follow. They're so accomplished and they've contributed so much. Fortunately, my act is very, very different from theirs, and my involvement in the Jewish community is very different from theirs. But I'd like to just start by telling you where I came from and a little bit about who I am. I grew up in a traditional household, 430 Bannerman Avenue between Powers and Andrews. My friends were Marsha and Lolik, Croya, and Celestia. We Jews shopped at Mr. Lecky's grocery store on the northwest corner of Bannerman and Powers, and the English people, as we call them, or the Ukrainians and the Poles, they all shopped at Mrs. Minarsky's on the northeast corner. And Mrs. Minarsky's son, Andy, was a World War II flyer and hero, and Andrew Minarsky School is named after Andy. We kept kosher, we observed all the holidays with all their special food preparations, and my father went to shul every Saturday. First at the Adas Yeshurun on McGregor, and then at Rosh Pina. A significant visual memory from those days and a very important aspect in my work as an artist, a visual artist, is light. From the candles on Shabbos and Hanukkah, and from the happiness that I saw radiating from my parents' faces, light. I went to kindergarten at Nellie Brodowski's, first in her home on Matheson Avenue, across from Rosh Pina, and then to Rosh Pina itself, and then to Rosh Pina Cheder. At about age 10, I just want to interject here for a minute. I have lots of Jewish references, many of which deal with synagogues and shuls, but I'm not an observant person. I'm an atheist, but as my cousin Earl Hirschfield once said to me, "So you're an atheist, what does that have to do with being Jewish?" And I said, well, not very much. So at about age 10, I became the junior chazan in the children's services Saturday mornings in the lower level of Rosh Pina Shul, with teacher Norman Stein officiating as the Baal Tefillah. So here I was, this little girl about age 10 with a little tallis and a little yarmulke, and I was davening Shachris, and I knew a fair amount about it. And if you haven't heard of Norman Stein, in the late 1960s, he opened Opus 69 Music Store, a fabulous place for finding vinyl records of all kinds. And Norman later moved to Los Angeles for a career in the music industry. My first involvement in organized community life was about age 8 or 9, when I was in a YMHA program at which I was on stage in the auditorium baking chocolate chip cookies. My involvement in this could very well have been facilitated through the efforts of my father, Label Hirschfield, who was the phys ed director at the Y. And this baking episode stood me in very good stead many years later. So you know how different I am from their presentations. About 1958, we moved to Elm Street in River Heights because my maternal grandfather, Lazer Tuberman, who is now living with us, was the shamus at Sherazedek, and Elm Street was much closer for him to the synagogue than our house on Bannerman Avenue. After my bat mitzvah, because I could sing, I was swooped up into the Sherazedek choir by the director, Jack Garland, and I continued in the choir until I started university. So again, here I am surrounded by Jewish liturgical music, and I knew it all and I loved it. I rejoined the choir in 2024 for the Sherazedek's 25th anniversary celebration and continued for about 4 years. The conductor then was Sheila Reutenberg, whom some of you will have known. In the late 1970s, I re-entered the organized Jewish community through the efforts of my mother, Babe Hirschfield, who had been involved from the inception of the Jewish Historical Society, and for many years was its executive director. Babe recruited my husband Myron, whom I call Mike, and me to the programming and the archives committees, and we remained active in one form or another for close to 40 years. And I know Babe was very interested in having Myron, Professor Myron Turner, on the committees, just to offset some of the old boys' attitude that was at the Jewish Historical Society at the time. Except for Ross Usiskin, I think, right? Yeah. Over the years, I've worked as a school librarian, an editor, a graphic designer, an art instructor and mentor, a lecturer at the School of Art, a researcher in the area of multiculturalism, an exhibits designer, and a volunteer for Yazidi refugees, and other things. And it was very important to me when I heard about the plight of the Yazidis, whom we all know about their terrible times. And as a Jew, I felt it was really important for me that I could help a group of people in the way that some Jews had been helped in the past. Myron and I also volunteered with Jewish Child and Family with Argentinian refugees. And I have to say that as whatever we could do for the Yazidis and the Argentinians, I felt we gained back 5,000 times in how they enriched our lives with their attitudes and their ideas of community and helping and a broader view of a world. My childhood baking performance at the YMHA became the backbone years later of my freelance gig during the 1990s as gourmet pastry chef for restaurants, private parties, and innumerable events in the arts community. And I see my pal Heather there, and we both baked for Swallow's Restaurant, the first very cool restaurant in Winnipeg, right?
I remember that.
Yeah. From 1999 to 2004, I was the coordinator of volunteers at the Sharon Home, where I learned so much about aging and dementia and respectful elder care. And I remember feeling when I was hired that this was really an honor for me to be working at the Sharon Home. But the lure of the creative life came roaring back when, in the 90s, I think, when invited by my dear friend Stan Carbone in 2005, grazie mille caro, grazie mille, I then began in the position of curator and exhibitions designer at the Jewish Heritage Center, and I worked on several major exhibitions and some smaller ones. So now what I would like to do is show you 4 images from the Jewish Heritage Center exhibitions that I worked on, then some of my own recent work, and then a short 5-minute video. So, Eva, slide number 1. The first exhibition I worked on was, can you see it, or do we need the lights out? You can see it. Was an absolutely gorgeous one about the Jewish wedding called Mazel Tov Chasana. And nepotistically, I put as the poster, the image of my Uncle Sheppy Hirschfield and Auntie Teeny Hirschfield on the poster. And then we were fortunate then to have the weddings exhibition and the Friedman exhibition in the large museum downstairs. So we had all sorts of space to have objects and costumes and artifacts. And because I'm visual, I see the world through the eyes of a visual artist. I had absolutely a great time deciding on what colors I would paint or have painted these enormous, I don't know how to hold, 40-foot high walls, 50 feet long, and I was able to go and choose colors and have these walls painted for me. Again, nepotistically, the little black and white photograph on an angle is my parents' wedding photograph. It took place at the home of Mrs. Schmelnitsky, a caterer. Next, please. The next exhibition was again in the large museum about Chief Justice Samuel Friedman. Sam was a brilliant lawyer, wrote statements about aspects of the law. The exhibition had materials from his youth in 1918 all the way up through into the late 80s. And I have to say that it was his wife, Brownie, who collected every photograph, every scrap of information, every article that was published in any paper whatsoever, and had all this material that I could use to build this exhibition. Again, that gorgeous color of red is Pratt & Lambert Pagoda Red. And I learned after I chose it, lots of interior designers love that color too, so it's a really good choice. And it was very a legal color. Next one, please. This was an exhibit that I was assistant and curator and exhibits designer with Stan, and this was about the Winnipeg garment industry. We had panels of information, wonderful photographs, artifacts that dealt with the development of the incredible garment industry that was in Winnipeg. The garment industry primarily run by Jewish people. It was quite astonishing. Now there's very little of that, and everything comes from China. I think there are 1 or 2 factories left, but we had information from the Manitoba Archives, from the Jewish Historical Heritage Center, from the Manitoba Museum, and we interviewed many, many, many people about it. One of the really, well, for me, really interesting facets of the exhibition was something about a project called the Tailoring Project, whereby Holocaust survivors and immigrants from Europe were brought to Canada to start, because they were tailors and sewers and they could participate in the garment industry. And I don't have the poster up now, but there was a wonderful bit of information from the Yakir family, Abe Yakir. And Abe sponsored a brother, I believe, and he said he would support them. And he would guarantee that they would work and they would earn money, but he would support them for the first few years. It's a wonderful, wonderful bit of information. The next one, please. They were all my favorite exhibitions about the Jewish community to work on. And this was really an exhibition that took me back into the history of the community as seen through the synagogues. I don't have that poster up, but we had a list of all the synagogues in Winnipeg, and there were like, I don't know, 80 of them. Little synagogues in homes, in little buildings, started by communities that had their own traditions and their own towns that they came from. They were quite wonderful. The synagogue on the poster, which I forget the name of it right now, it no longer exists. Ava, can you?
Knesset Israel.
Is the
Knesset Israel.
Knesset Israel. And is that the photograph where there's a man standing on next to the fence?
Right.
Yeah. It's so emblematic of a time and a look and an attitude, and of social class as well.
Where was it?
Stan, where was Knesset Israel? Yeah.
46 Charles Street.
46 Charles Street. Thank you.
It says on the poster.
It said on the poster. Gotta get the next black and white photograph is of the cornerstone laying of the Sherazet synagogue. And excuse me. For this exhibition was the first time that I had ever been to the Ashkenazi, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I have many photographs of the interior of the Ashkenazi. If you haven't been there, if you have the opportunity to go there, it's absolutely gorgeous. Then the bottom poster is of the eternal lights. I'm obsessed by light, and synagogues in town all have or had very, very interesting eternal lights at the ceiling. They are representative of the styles of design. There's one of the second one from the left is at the, I think it's either at the Ashkenazi or the Chesed Shalemis. Really astonishing pieces of sculpture. Next slide, please. Okay, I'd just like to show you a few of my own pieces, just a few of which have close ties to Jewish material, subject material. But before I tell you a little about that, I just want to tell you a bit about my art career. I've been working as an artist for about 40 years. I've done lots of exhibiting and lots of making of art. My work is informed by abstraction. My work is not narrative. I'm interested in boundaries. I like to talk about what's here and what's mysterious. And I investigate through the sensuality of color, texture, pattern, and light. And and I feel through the materiality of a work of art, the insubstantial nature of feeling and thought can be experienced, even momentarily. So these 4 pieces were based on Jewish ceremonial fabrics. I focused on certain of the fabrics because they elicited memories of family or particular sensations. And I was at shul very coincidentally this Saturday, and the Parsha being read had to do with the details of the construction of the ancient tabernacle, purely by coincidence. And it's endless, and it goes on detail after detail. Next slide. I occasionally use family photographs in my work, and these are from an exhibition I called Fiction of Relationship, and they're photographs taken from my personal archive. Next, please. I'm interested in language, and here are just some text image pieces from a few years ago of poetry. The middle vertical piece is a Hungarian song which is sung by, it's very well known among Jewish Hungarians, and it has to, it's felt there's a messianic message about it. Next, please. I've worked with orbs for many years, and the orb is a metaphor for many things. It's infinity, perfection, and endless motion. Also, when I began to work with orbs, I was somewhat interested in Kabbalah, and orbs in Kabbalah are associated with various aspects of the divine coming to influence human behavior and psyche. Okay, now the last thing I wanted to, there are more images of orbs, endless. I'm obsessed with orbs, a few more and more and more and more and more and more, and that's what I do. Most of them have been exhibited. Then just a few minutes, I have a short video which is about a universal themes, but it's about the death of my mother at the Sharon home. It's not grim. It's, I would be very honored. I'm very honored to have a few minutes to show it here. Maybe the lights have to go out. Turn the lights up.
It started in the spring. Her walk slowed. She began to sleep in the afternoon. Her behavior changed. One June morning, she slipped, not hurt, but we worried. She weakened after that, and then it began. It really began. She'll stay here at the home, her home, no hospital. If severe, then morphine, immediately, aggressively. We saw how tenderly she was cared for, talked to, touched. Such care, such kindness. You're keeping her alive, alive. Smiling, bits of conversation, lovingly focused on her family and her surroundings. She was joyful. Beauty and joy in everything. She laughed, loved the sunlight. She glowed. She was happy. Then frail and tired and failing, agitated, restless. Her spirit was yearning for its release. Her neighbor later said she was trembling like a leaf in the wind. Like a leaf in the wind, she was trembling. Sie hat gezittert wie ein Blatt in den Wind. Wie ein Blatt in den Wind, sie hat gezittert. Come right away, right away. Skin cool, clammy, and mottled. Breathing shallow, irregular. Her gaze was somewhere out there, not here with us. We love you, Mommy. You are the best Mommy ever. We love you. We love you. She's in her final moments. And then, softly, she was gone. We stood there, stunned, holding hands like her little children we had once been. It was silent. I couldn't breathe. The air had been sucked out of the room.
Thanks, Susan. We've got a few questions, and then we'll open up to audience Q&A. Sorry, this chair's in an awkward place.
Oh, it really smelled.
Um,
There, I'm going to do another one.
Electronic device in here.
Yeah. Answer the questions.
Okay, so I've got a few questions for you guys, and there's only one mic between you, but I guess we can share. And I can lend you this one if you need. You actually answered some of my questions in your presentations, but I've got a few others. And I know, Leah, you touched on this topic, but do you believe that the role of women in Jewish communal life has changed over the years? And do you feel that women play a larger role in the decision-making process now?
Thanks.
Yes? Can I answer that? It's interesting because National Council of Jewish Women, Winnipeg section, just celebrated its 100th anniversary. And so in the course of that, I had the opportunity to look through the archives and do a fair bit of research and learn about the history and looking at opportunities that existed 100 years ago is night and day from the opportunities that we have and that we see today. And so I think, yes, women are in a position to make decisions and to lead. But I think there are still barriers, and it's important to have, I guess, sort of recognition that not everyone has the capacity to contribute to the same extent. Personally, I've been able to contribute because I've had family support, and I've been able to leverage that family support and really lean into community volunteerism. But I think it's important to acknowledge that single mothers have different challenges and different barriers in that respect. And I think too, not everyone is in a position to donate the unpaid labor required required of volunteer life, and not everyone has flexibility with the types of jobs that they have. I think, not everyone has autonomy over their schedule, and not everyone has predictability over their schedule, and so I think women have, generally speaking, for sure, far more opportunities, but not everyone has the same access to those opportunities, and so I think it's important to really be mindful, and from the perspective of an organization, to really be fully accessible and really be fully inclusive. I think we have to sort of be aware of capacity differences and try to accommodate that, however that presents, just to really have full inclusion, because I think we're all strengthened by that, but it takes deliberate building to ensure we have that inclusivity, so that access to decisions are real and not just superficial.
Do you want each of us to answer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to repeat, because I agree with you. The only thing that I would add is I remember the volunteer work being done in the very initial stages for myself. I certainly can't speak for the photographs on display downstairs, but generally speaking, the women were doing secretarial work very often. I'm calling it that because I don't know what else to call it, but basically they were running the Stettler machines, and they were stuffing envelopes, and they were doing all sorts of work so that the organizations didn't have to hire as much staff. And times have changed. Women have careers. They have their own they're educated differently. And I've already spoken to the fact that there are other ways for women to contribute philanthropically, and the world has changed. I know with the Women's Endowment, the grants committee is women, and they make the decisions, and they read grant applications, and that's their volunteer work. So I'm agreeing.
I don't think this is really my question to be able to answer, because my activity as a Jewish woman, as a woman who's a Jew, is so different. I'm an artist. There are many, many Jewish women in the community who are not involved so much with community organizations, but art enriches life, and it enriches our communities, and that's our contributions, and that's...
Oops.
Okay.
I'm gonna knock over something else.
What do you think that the future of this community looks like for women? What roles will they occupy, and how will the gender structure of this community look for the next generation? Can you make a prediction about that, or a wild guess?
That's a tougher one.
That's a very tough one.
I'll give it a try. Well, I will say one thing. Women's roles have changed. I don't know if they're going to stay that way, but there was a point in time when I was at the foundation that all the heads of the organizations in this building were female. And there was a time where that never would have been the case, of course. So when I looked around then, I would say that's how things have changed and they've evolved. So for the future, I think it'll just even itself out. I mean, I think for the most part, that old boys club I talked about has pretty much disappeared. And people are more conscious of it. And we've probably already crossed the threshold in this community, in my view. The future for women.
Again, I feel like I'm a fish out of water here, because I really don't know. I mean, when I see in the world of art, there's now a group of young Jewish artists called Rimonim, and I think it's fairly split between all genders, right? I don't know about the role.
They're just women, I think.
Just women?
Yeah,
Aren't
5 women.
aren't 5 women?
They're fabulous.
Oh, I thought there were a couple of young men in it. No? No. This isn't working. Oops. I don't have anything else.
Okay, well, speaking of the future generations, and this is a question that, applies to not just in the Jewish community, but in the artistic community and other communities as well. How do you think that we can build a culture of mentorship to foster the next generation of women leaders?
Can you repeat?
Sorry. How can we build a culture of mentorship to foster the next generation of women leaders in this community and any community?
I can try to answer that one. I think we have to ask people to get involved and invite people to get involved and not make assumptions about people's interests and their and not make any sort of assumptions. I think sometimes we find ourselves surprised by the, going back to what I said before about asking. And I think people bring different skills, and so I think that's something to sort of actively.
I think they're pretty low battery tone on this one.
I think it's something we have to be deliberate and thoughtful of, because you want new energy and you want new ideas, and it doesn't happen by accident. I give up.
Here, try this one.
Give up. It doesn't happen by accident. I think strategy is important.
I think if I understood the question correctly, I think it's really important to make sure that I don't have little children anymore, but that we raise our children.
Raise the
No
mic.
good?
Put it right to your mouth.
Right to your mouth.
What?
If you put it right closer to your mouth.
Oh, okay, is that better? Okay. I think that we have to make sure that we raise the children in as much of a Jewish community environment as we can. And whether it's camp or school or the community center or whatever it is, because everybody's different and different people appreciate different things. But those things are generally instilled at a very young age. And I think if we continue to do that, and I think if I know that the Heritage Center is doing a program in the schools, all those things add up, and that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that our kids know, particularly in this day and age, to stand up and say that they're Jewish and to know what that means, and we've got to give them that strength of character, I guess.
The art world is a little different these days. There are many, many, many women involved as curators, as gallery directors, as mentors, as writers, as architects, as designers, so many ways. So I think the art world has changed so much from the past, Jewish or not.
I think just one more question, then we'll turn it over to the audience for some questions. This mic feels a lot louder than it did before. So we've been talking a lot in our exhibit about history and the history of the women in this community and the challenges that they have faced in the past. And I'm wondering if in the early parts of your careers, or even in the present day, Can you recall any times when women's contributions were written out of the official histories of our institutions? Be that through men taking credit for women's work or women being overlooked on the basis of their gender. Do you have any experience with those experiences?
I have a little bit of a few. Over the years, having seen and been involved in many, many programs and exhibitions, artists were very rarely mentioned. It was the professions, the workers, the storekeepers, the doctors, all sorts of other professions, but the people from the art world, music, writing, were very much on the side. So while I appreciate being on this panel, and I knew what people would be talking about, I thought, well, what is my contribution? But I am a Jew, I'm a woman, and I have a role that I play in the community, and I've contributed. So I was very pleased to be invited as a mini representative of the creative women, Jewish women in the community. Thank you for the soapbox.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just want to say that we came from a history of Jewish women contributing. I remember my Baba would go to collect money for charity. She was a pioneer woman. And she would walk into the Shmata district, into the different buildings, and she would insist on seeing the man, and she would go in and she would tell him that he was going to contribute. And she was just one of many women of that generation that did that. And so I heard what she said. My mother was very active in art. I heard, and I think that here I am with my 3 generations, and I think they're doing pretty well in contributing to their community.
I'll add a quick note that I personally, having worked in the Jewish community for a number of years now, have benefited from all of your volunteerism. Right now, Leah is volunteering with the Jewish Foundation where I work. Marsha's contribution to the Jewish Foundation, historically we know. And Susan, when I was at the Simkin Center, was a volunteer at Simkin Center, and we benefited from her work. So just wanted to add that little note that I personally have benefited from all of it.
Heather, I was going to ask you to say something about the Ord store. You know, the Ord thrift shop was on Sherbrooke. I don't know for how many years it was there. For many years it was Winnipeg Women's Ord's bread and butter. Thank you to the Clapmans, Ruth and her husband, who found the storefront. They put in the fixtures from their factory. They would bring in a lot of clothing. And I think we paid, there were volunteers, and we might have had 2 paid people, I'm not sure. And your mother, for years, was your house was either a drop-off place for used clothing, or she would go around and pick up. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, the basement was always full of jackets.
So there you are. Yeah, I just want to say one thing about the Y. I joined when I was 9 years old in the clubs, the boys' clubs and the girls' clubs. And I'm pretty sure some of you might remember this, that one thing on our agenda each year was a community service project. And I do remember standing with I don't know, the thing around my neck in front of the Mount Carmel Clinic, and we were collecting, I don't know, for something. The other thing is, Marsha, when you talk about an old boys club, when I was recruited by Earl Hirschfield to be on the Y board, and we were still on Hargrave, and I remember my first meeting, it was a rainy Sunday morning, and I walked into the building, walked up the steps, and 3 women, I walked in, the only person I knew there was Earl, 3 women, Elaine Charlotte, Hester Croft, who just passed away, and Gail Corn. They came up to me, they introduced themselves, they said, Sharon, come and sit with me. And that's when I learned that it's not only you as a volunteer doing something, it's very important to retain our volunteers and make them feel welcome.
I want to say a couple things. So first of all, my experience was very similar to Leah's growing up, and we've known each other for a few years. And I had the privilege of volunteering with your wonderful dad. But one thing about the Winnipeg community that I want to point out is I lived in Toronto for 25 years, and I came back to Winnipeg a few years ago. It's not like this everywhere, where we have a situation in this community. My mother chaired women's campaign. My mother was not a huge giver of financially. My mom was a very, very active volunteer. My mom was very involved with National Council, which is what made me want to do the same and follow in her footsteps. In other communities, somewhere like Toronto, if you are not a big, big giver, forget it, you don't have leadership roles in a lot of the organizations. Not all, but a lot, especially Federation is just not something that would happen. I think that's one of the beautiful things about Winnipeg is that doesn't really matter. It's what you have to give of yourself and what you have to give to the community overall. It's not strictly all about what's in your pocket. So I think that's something that we should really value and never take for granted in our community. And then I have a question that's completely different, but Susan, do you find now it's become maybe more challenging for not just Jewish women, but for Jewish artists, Jewish curators, Jewish executives in the art world? There's a lot of controversy happening right now where board members are being kicked off of boards, or curators are being kicked out of their jobs because there's controversy politically regarding anything that's a Zionist point of view or an anti-Zionist point of view. Are you seeing any of that in your world professionally?
I personally am not. I think because of my age and because I'm not as involved as I used to be. I'm aware that of controversial actions that have been happening, like the AGO with they're not buying that Nan Golden piece because at some point or other she said something that upset various people on the board. I'm not sure how I feel about that kind of action. There are artists over time who've been anti-Semitic, hated Jews, and yet we still see their work or read their work. It's a very thorny issue. As I say, I personally haven't been affected by that. My artist friends haven't really talked about that. I've noticed, I have many friends on Facebook, but in the artist comments, there's very little commentary about this kind of, the feelings and the problems that are going on now. I don't know. I really don't know what is going on. I think if you're younger, it's more difficult, much more difficult. I know that musicians and artists across internationally have had lectures or artwork canceled, or they have been uninvited from exhibitions because they're Jewish. It's anti-Semitism. It's more than just Israel hatred, it's anti-Semitism at the bottom line.
I just wanted to add something to what you said, Susan. It also is working in the other direction, that specifically in the music world, where musicians are creating anti-Semitic works, and this has become the reality today. And really horrific things, like there is a local band called that in December put out a song called Jesus is Palestinian, and more recently put out a song in which they accuse Jews of poisoning wells, which is an ancient anti-Semitic trope. And the viciousness of what they are putting out there just on social media is really, really frightening. And it makes Jewish musicians and people in theater, they're targeted, and makes them feel very uncomfortable and left out.
Hi, thank you very much for your discussion tonight and your contributions. I have a specific question for Susan. Susan, I found it interesting. By the way, thank you, Susan, for your work at the Jewish Heritage Center. Susan, you said that you identify as an atheist, and as a visual or graphic artist, you identify, or you have a strong appreciation for orb-like figures, which you described as being symbolic of divinity. And I'm just interested in knowing how you reconcile those two things.
I don't think it's a problem. You know, to quote my dear departed cousin Earl, it has nothing to do. I don't think that there's a problem at all. It's not a conflict. It's a little bit off what you are asking, but I think my actions as an artist, being a Jew, I think it has to do with perhaps the way I look at things. It's not that other artists aren't introspective and interested in what lies beyond the surface, but I personally feel that for me, that's a Jewish attitude, and that's how I deal with being an artist. That's what I'm interested in. I don't think it's a conflict at all. I mean, I still occasionally go to shul. What can I say? Thanks for the question. Can I tell you my story about how I became an atheist? My husband has heard it 1,000,000 times. My best friend on Bannerman Avenue was Didi Ellenduk, Ukrainian. And my father, Label Hirschfield, played sports with George Ellenduk, Didi's father. And one day Didi's mother said to me, "Susan, you want to stay for lunch?" "Great, what are you having for lunch?" "Hot dogs." I thought, oh no, they're treif, they're pork. What am I going to do? So I had to balance issues. Was I going to enjoy these wonderful hot dogs? Or was I going to start explaining to Mrs. Ellenduk how I couldn't eat pork? And I thought, you know what, I'll just take a chance. And if I'm walking from that side of Bannerman Avenue to my side of Bannerman Avenue, if the road doesn't open up and swallow me, then I know there's perhaps there isn't a God, and I became an atheist. That's my story.
I have a question that may not be for the panelists, but for the team at the Jewish Heritage Center, which is when you were doing the research for the Women's Work exhibit, I know that Olivia had said that one of the difficulties was that the women were always listed as Mrs. say Earl Hirschfield or Mrs. Melgum, and that it became very difficult to track down women's names. Did you run into any of those issues when you were doing your research?
Absolutely. I don't know. I don't have the statistics, but if you look at the articles in the Israeli press, which I'm not an expert in the Israeli press because I don't read Yiddish, but most of the references to women in the Jewish posts up until about the 1960s did not mention women's names, unless they were high-profile women. In some cases, there were exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, they were named after they were referred to as by their husbands' names. So it was Mrs. Earl Hirschfield, or Mrs. Great Maxwell. Despite being so, they were often referred to as in juxtaposition to husbands' names. I just wanted to actually read one quote from the Jewish Post, because this was written back in 1928, and I'll be brief, sorry. Belle, if you want to make a closing remarks.
No.
Oh, okay. So this is what basically what the Jewish Post have to say about the role and contributions of women to Jewish communal life. And this again goes back to 1928, but I'm going to have to put my glasses on. So bear with me. It may come as a surprise to some that practically all of the welfare work of the city is carried on by women in every field of endeavor: philanthropy, social welfare, Zionist activity, relief, entertainment, education. They are of supreme importance. They have a ready hand for the sick, the poor, now this is the term that was used back in those days, the ignorant, the unfortunate, the strange, meaning basically immigrants or foreigners, the afflicted, the widow, all who have a call upon human sympathy. The same article impresses on its readers the humanitarian and altruistic impulses of Winnipeg Jewish women. It is difficult to imagine the plight of the unfortunate and the dependent through the country and in Eretz Israel if the work of the Jewish woman suddenly ceased. Only such an unhappy contingency would awake the Jewish world to a proper appreciation of their labors. It is not the nature of our women, however, to expect and desire praise. That was from the Jewish Post from 1928. I think it speaks volumes to what women did then and what women are doing now.
Do we know who wrote the?
There was no, it was an editorial, so there's no reference to the author, although I'd like to find out who it was. But yeah.
Okay, I think that's all we have, but we do have cookies and tea and pop at the back of the room. Thank you to our wonderful, inspirational panelists. Also, thank you to Stan, who exhibited this, or who created this, curated this wonderful exhibit that you can go see downstairs.